Okay. Be on your best behavior.
I sent you a request to let me share my screen.
Go for it.
Super, thanks.
Yep.
Okay. Make sure you guys have that. Okay, you guys have my first slide up on your screen? Tom, yes, no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, all right, thumbs up. Thanks for the warm welcome. Again, my name is Scott Mingus. I am a retired scientist from the global pulp and paper industry. Moved to York, Pennsylvania in 2001 when the vice president of research and development retired for one of the local paper companies here in York County. And I started writing Civil War books as a hobby during a lot of my business travel. I'm currently in the process over this winter. I'll be writing what will be my 39th book. It'll be Railroads in the Gettysburg Campaign. So that'll be kind of a compilation of a lot of the research I've did over the years, a lot of which has appeared in 5 of my other railroad books that I've written over the years. So bear with me. My voice is a little bit tired. I spoke last night to about 60 people in Pittsburgh and didn't get in until 2 o'clock in the morning, so my throat's a little bit raw. Come back with me to 1862. In the summer of 1862, Stonewall Jackson met with a Confederate congressman named Alexander Boteler in his tent during the Shenandoah Valley campaign. Jackson told the congressman, and I quote, "Give me 36,000 men and I will take the war to the banks of the Susquehanna River." Now, Jackson's goal was always to go to Pennsylvania. He doesn't get his 36,000 men. Instead, he's transferred to the Army in Northern Virginia and moves from the Shenandoah Valley to the Virginia Peninsula. The commander of that army, Joseph Johnston, is wounded. He's replaced by Robert E. Lee. Jackson continues to hammer on Lee. We need to go to Pennsylvania. That invasion in September 1862 is thwarted at the Battle of Sharpsburg, or Antietam to those of us in the north. But all throughout the winter of 1862-63, Lee and Jackson want to do it again, only this time bigger with more troops. So after the Battle of Chancellorsville in May of 1863, which Stonewall Jackson, of course, is going to suffer his wound that will ultimately lead to his death, Jackson is now gone, but Lee still wants to invade Pennsylvania. And the goals really haven't changed. I mean, his number one goal, obvious above everything else, is to beat the Yankees in an open battle somewhere north of the Mason-Dixon line. That they would hope would accelerate cries for peace. Maybe Abraham Lincoln goes to the negotiating table. Perhaps Southern independence might be the result of capturing a significant chunk of South Central Pennsylvania, possibly even Harrisburg, the state capital. Now, Lee's got a lot of other goals in mind, not one of which is feeding his army. He's almost out of food. They've had problems because for 18 months they've been fighting in Virginia. And so most of the food in that area is long gone or is in short supply. They also want to take attention off of Vicksburg, where U.S. Grant is investing the last remaining free port on the Mississippi River. And in fact, the Union Ninth Corps is on its way there, and the invasion of Pennsylvania will cause Ambrose Burnside and his men to turn around and head back to Cincinnati, Ohio. So almost everything Lee wants to do is going to work in the Gettysburg campaign, except win the Battle of Gettysburg. The last goal, the one we want to talk about today, is to threaten railroads and supply and communication routes, i.e. A number of different railroads that are involved in the what would become the Gettysburg campaign. So hopefully on the screen, you should see this slide. We're going to talk about each one of these railroads, all of which will play a role in the Gettysburg campaign. Now, in the space of 45 to 50 minutes, we certainly cannot go through each of these railroads in any kind of depth at all. But we want to at least get started, talk about some of them. From the bottom of the screen to the top, we're going to talk about the Orange and Alexandria Railroad, the Manassas Gap Railroad, Winchester and Potomac, the Baltimore and Ohio, Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore, the Western Maryland, the Northern Central, the Franklin Railroad, the Gettysburg Railroad, the Cumberland Valley Railroad, Hanover Branch, and finally the Pennsylvania Railroad. each one of these has a role to play in the 1863 Gettysburg campaign. So Lee's army starts moving out on June 3rd, 1863, and they're heading to the northwest. Lee will leave 1/3 of his army behind under Ambrose Powell Hill to mask his movements and make sure the Yankees don't know his intentions. And he starts heading towards the Shenandoah Valley. Preceding him is his cavalry under Jeb Stuart. Now, the first railroad that's involved in the campaign is the Orange and Alexandria. That had been a significant railroad before the Civil War, connecting the interior of Virginia, central Virginia, and Richmond, etc., with Baltimore and with Washington via connections. The railroad is pretty much out of commission because Manassas Junction, where the Manassas Gap Railroad met the Orange and Alexandria, has been pretty much in Union hands. Alexandria is in Union hands, but the southern part of the railroad is still in Confederate hands. Now, the first battle, the Gettysburg campaign, is going to take place on June 9th, 1863, and happens to be fought within sight of a railroad station on the Orange and Alexandria line. That battle is, of course, Brandy Station. There, Jeb Stuart's cavalry will fight pretty much to a tactical stalemate, although he does leave the field in the hands of the Union forces. And Brandy Station itself does not suffer any significant damage during the battle. The railroad line doesn't suffer much at all. But with the fighting in and around the Orange and Alexandria, it continues to reinforce to Washington that they don't really know what Robert E. Lee's up to. The President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, has issued orders that you better protect the roads to Washington and Baltimore just in case that this is a Confederate incursion that they'll turn and move east or southeast towards these towns. In Ohio, where I'm from originally, the governor of the Buckeye State is convinced they're coming to Columbus, Ohio. The Robert E. Lee is going to cross the Ohio River. He asked for 25,000 volunteers. He's going to get them. In West Virginia, soon to be a state, not yet a state on June 9th, but on June 20th, it will become the 35th state of the Union. The governor of West Virginia, incoming governor of West Virginia, is convinced again they're coming to Wheeling, they're coming to Charleston. He asked for 25,000 volunteers. Here in Pennsylvania, our governor, Andrew Curtin, a Republican, a very strong ally of the President of the United States, Governor Curtin asked for 50,000 volunteers in case the Confederates start coming this direction. So nobody's really sure what's going on, other than the fact there's been a cavalry battle near the Orange and Alexandria Railroad. They're starting to get some answers in the next 3 days. The Confederates start leaving the line of the Orange and Alexandria and start moving into the Shenandoah Valley. Now, that's where we're going to start getting interesting, because again, the Confederate goal is to wreck the railroads that are supplying the Union Army. One of those is the Baltimore and Ohio. So on June 14th, 1863, Robert Rodes' division of the Confederate Second Corps will attack Union position guarding Martinsburg, West Virginia, soon to be West Virginia, then Virginia. It's a fairly small fight. It's rather insignificant. The Union forces will withdraw, and that will leave the Baltimore and Ohio at Martinsburg in the hands of the Confederates. Now, Confederate Army has attacked the B&O before. Stonewall Jackson had famously grabbed a whole bunch of locomotives and rolling stock back in 1861. There have been fights along the line of the railroad in 1862, and now in 1863, Robert Rodes' men have taken Martinsburg. He entrusts his mounted wing. His commander is a guy named Alfred Gallatin Jenkins. Jenkins has more than 1,000 mounted infantry. They call themselves cavalrymen, but in reality, they're mounted infantry. Their job at Martinsburg is to wreck the B&O. So they are going to take out about 3 miles or so of track on either side of the town. There's a blockhouse that the Union Army had erected to try to protect a key railroad bridge. They're going to end up destroying that railroad bridge anyway. and the B&O Railroad is severed, so that no longer, temporarily at least, canned supplies end up going to Baltimore or Washington, D.C. from the west, at least using the B&O. So Jenkins does a pretty good job. They're pretty effective in what he's doing. Now, concurrent with the fighting on June 14th at Martinsburg has been a 3-day battle on June 13th, 14th, and 15th at Winchester, Virginia. That fight, the subject of one of my books on the Second Battle of Winchester, is a pretty pitched affair. There are a number of Union troops, about 8,000 men from the Union 6th Corps, or sorry, Union 8th Corps, that are in and around the Winchester and Berryville area. Their job is to protect the Shenandoah Valley, particularly the Valley Turnpike, which is the back door, if you will, to Harrisburg. The Shenandoah Valley, when you cross the Potomac River, becomes the Cumberland Valley, and the Shenandoah/Cumberland Valley ends at Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Of course, the capital of the largest single Republican state in the time of the Civil War. So this 3-day battle that's going to occur at Winchester, the first 2 days of the battle, the Union troops are overwhelmed. They are pushed back into the town. And at 2 o'clock on the morning of Monday, June 15th, 1863, the Union commander, an Indiana general by the name of Robert Houston Milroy, decides he's going to pull out. He abandons his wounded, he abandons his artillery, spikes all the guns to try, hopefully to render them inoperable, throws all the ammunition down into the cisterns and the wells of the town, and skedaddles at 2 o'clock in the morning. He's going to follow Route 11, which parallels the old Winchester Potomac Railroad. Now, that railroad has been rendered inoperable earlier in the Civil War. Most of its bridges have been taken down, particularly the bridges at Harper's Ferry. The railroad tracks are still there, but no trains can reach Winchester. But those railroad tracks are going to play a key role because as the Union forces withdraw from Winchester heading towards Martinsburg, which you can't get to because of, 6,000 Confederates are occupying Martinsburg, Milroy's only real hope is to make a right turn off of Valley Turnpike and head on the Charlestown Road over the Winchester and Potomac Railroad tracks and head to Charlestown, West Virginia, and from there reach Harper's Ferry and perceive safety. Problem is, the Confederate commander, Richard Ewell, knows exactly what the Union commander is going to do, and he has already had his troops beat the Union to the railroad. So I'm standing on the modern bridge on the Charlestown Road when I took this picture. It's looking north at the old tracks again of the Winchester Potomac Railroad. The inset on the bottom left is the Civil War era bridge. It's been replaced by a new bridge a few feet to the south of the original Civil War bridge.
Wow.
But here on the north side of the bridge, looking down into that railroad grade, you'll see that it's a defilade. The surrounding terrain is higher. So the Confederate soldiers under Allegheny Johnson's division have filed into this area, troops from North Carolina and Virginia in particular, Maryland in particular, George Stuart's brigade, and they have erected as many obstacles as they can on the western side of the railroad tracks. They've piled up boxes, crates, fence rails, whatever they can find, timber, whatever, anything will stop a bullet or at least slow a bullet down. They'll put on the western side of those railroad tracks. If I turn around and take the same picture from the modern bridge and look to the south, the tracks, then Jesse Williams' 2nd Louisiana, or Pelican Brigade, as it's often called, they'll file into those part of the railroad tracks and repeat the same exercise in trying to fortify the position. When the Union forces arrive, 3:30-ish or so in the morning of June 15th, trying desperately to break through this railroad obstacle, the Confederate commanders put one cannon on top of the bridge, on the highway bridge over the railroad tracks. He's put a line of artillery on the ridge and back of the railroad tracks, and they just pound away at the Union position. Remember, the Yankees don't have a single cannon because they're all left behind in Winchester. Bottom line on this aborted attempt to try to break out is Milroy flees the battlefield, abandons his men and of his 8,000 soldiers that are here along the railroad tracks after 5 separate and very unsuccessful attempts to wrest the railroad from Confederate control, and most importantly, grab the bridge over the railroad tracks. About half of the Union men throw down their weapons, raise the white flag, and surrender. The disaster at Stevenson's Depot on the Winchester and Potomac Railroad, known to Yankees as the Battle of Carter's Woods, known to Confederates as the Battle of Stevenson's Depot. It's a huge fiasco. The next time, Milroy loses 55% of his men as prisoners of war. More than 4,100 prisoners are taken. The next time the United States Army loses more than 50% of its force on a battlefield is Philippines, Corregidor, where, of course, most of the entire force is captured there. So this is the biggest debacle for the U.S. Army between Harper's Ferry in 1862 and Corregidor in 1941. It's just an unmitigated disaster. But it's a battle nobody ever talks about or hears about because it's overshadowed 2 weeks later by Gettysburg. But the railroad remains solidly in Confederate hands. Milroy's men are now prisoners of war. But the goal isn't to stay at Winchester. The goal, of course, is to come to Pennsylvania. So Major General Jubal Early will leave 3 regiments, 2 from North Carolina, 1 from Virginia, behind in Winchester to process these 4,000 prisoners. And the rest of Early's division and the rest of Richard Ewell's Second Corps continue the march to Pennsylvania. These 3 regiments, a scant 500 or so men, have to guard 4,000 prisoners. And they finally decide, what are we going to do with these guys? We're going to have to take them to Richmond. Well, they're not going to march 4,000 guys to Richmond, but they figure we can at least march them up the valley, that's south in the Shenandoah Valley, to Stanton. And at Stanton, we have the railhead for the Virginia Central Railroad. And so over a 2-week period, all 4,000 Union prisoners, at least the ones that are able to be moved, are marched up the valley to Stanton, and over the next 2 weeks after that, so it takes about a month for the whole process, these 4,000 men are going to be herded into railroad cars on the Virginia Central Railroad. And these prisoners of war are then going to be taken through the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I mean literally through the mountains. The Virginia Central has a series of tunnels back in 1860s that provided a reasonably short grade. I mean, they're 1.5% to 2% for part of this, but at least you can get through the mountains. And so these prisoners of war are going to be funneled on the VCRR. And you can see in yellow the route. The first blue circle there is Winchester. They're going to walk up the valley to Stanton and put on the train, which then follows the yellow route through Trevilian Station, which in 1864 is going to become yet another Civil War battle along a railroad. They're going to be taken there to Hanover Junction, and there the trains are sent south to Richmond. Of these 4,000 prisoners, the officers are put in Libby Prison. The enlisted men are put in either Belle Isle or in Castle Thunder. They, over the rest of 1864 or 63 and into early 1864, most of the second Winchester prisoners are put on trains and are sent down to Catawba, South Carolina. From there, a number of prisoners that had been originally taken in June of 1863 at Winchester are put on trains in Catawba and sent to a brand new prison camp in Georgia, a place called Andersonville, where a number of these guys will end up perishing after being captured. So the last few train rides of their lives were, of course, miserable experiences. With the Winchester now secured, the Shenandoah Valley in Confederate hands, the Confederates now cross the Potomac River and start moving through Maryland on their way to Pennsylvania. So the next railroad we want to talk about as they start coming into South Central Pennsylvania is the Franklin Railroad. The Franklin is owned by the Cumberland Valley Railroad. It's operated in 1863 as a wholly owned subsidiary,
Wow.
using the one timetable and one unified set of rolling stock and equipment. And the Cumberland Valley Railroad has laid its own rails down so that the rails match. Instead of having flat iron, now they have T rails to match the whole system. Albert Gallatin Jenkins, the guy who had wrecked the Baltimore and Ohio at Martinsburg, is given the assignment of wrecking the Franklin Railroad. It's going to burn the railroad depot at Greencastle, Pennsylvania, the first town south or north of the Mason-Dixon line. They're going to rip down all the telegraph wires. They're going to destroy the culverts, all the trestles. And in a precursor to what in 1864 Southerners referred to as Sherman's neckties, Jenkins' men will pull up the rails. They will take up the ties. They will pile the ties into giant bonfires. They'll heat the rails of the Franklin Railroad over the bonfires, and then they will bend them around trees. So I guess technically a year before Sherman's neckties, we should talk about Jenkins' neckties in South Central Pennsylvania. But the Franklin Railroad is just totally destroyed. There's really nothing of any military significance at all that's going to survive Albert Gallatin Jenkins' men. These guys are getting really good. I mean, they wrecked the B&O of Martinsburg. Now they wrecked the Franklin Railroad. One of their men will later write in his diary, "We've become the best darn gum bridge burners and railroad wreckers that we can become." Now in 1862, Jeb Stuart had come into Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, a month after the Battle of Antietam with his entire cavalry force. They had destroyed the Cumberland Valley Railroad's equipment and rolling stock at Chambersburg. But one of his key assignments was to destroy the largest bridge on the Cumberland Valley Railroad west of Harrisburg, and that was over the Conchetigue Creek at Scotland, Pennsylvania. But Jeb Stuart had believed the lies of a bunch of Pennsylvania civilians. When he asked about this bridge in Scotland, they told him, "You can't burn it. It's made of iron. Can't do it. No way." Stuart believes the lying Pennsylvanians, and his men never go to Scotland to even check it out. He ends up retreating back into Virginia when Union forces under Colonel James Beaver will arrive via rail through York and Gettysburg and start marching towards Chambersburg. Stuart turns around, he gets within 6 miles of Gettysburg and ends up leaving, going back into Virginia. Albert Gallatin Jenkins, whose men are now really good at wrecking the railroads, decides he's going to check this thing out for himself. He sends the 14th Virginia Cavalry. Again, they're mounted infantry, they're not cavalry, but they are sent to Scotland, and they find the bridge is easily combustible. It's wood. It's actually a relatively old bridge, and they're able to destroy it within a matter of an hour or so. A point that Jenkins, no doubt, will take some pleasure in, that Stuart said he couldn't destroy this bridge, and yet Jenkins certainly can do it. Now, the B&O gets back in the picture on the next day, on June 17th. Not satisfied with the destruction of Martinsburg, Robert E. Lee has ordered another attack on the Baltimore and Ohio. For this one, the Confederate High Command selects the 35th Battalion Virginia Cavalry, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Elijah Veers White. Now, Elijah White's a guy most Civil War historians have never heard of, but A.P. Hill, Confederate Lieutenant General, wrote before he died, and I quote, "E.V. White is a trump and the best Confederate cavalry officer we have in the service." He thinks
Wow.
this guy's better than Jeb Stuart. He thinks this guy's better than Wade Hampton, better than Fitzhugh Lee. I don't know about that, but that was A.P. Hill's opinion. I do know Elijah White's really good. His men come screaming into Point of Rocks. There is a Union cavalry detachment there under Lieutenant Joshua Crown from Maryland Eastern Shore. And so these loyal Marylanders will fight a short-pitched and very unsuccessful attempt to stop the raging Virginians and Marylanders that are coming at them under E.V. White. White's men will drive off Crown and the defenders, and they will then rummage all over Point of Rocks, Maryland. For those of you who may not be familiar with Point of Rocks, where Route 15, US Route 15, crosses the Potomac River, there is a roundabout just north of the bridge, and that will lead you east to Point of Rocks. Point of Rocks, Maryland, there you see in the bottom right of the picture, was on the B&O Railroad. White, to his delight, finds an intact B&O train sitting there, steamed up, ready to go. He gets everybody off the train, it's a passenger train, and sets the thing on fire. They burn the Baltimore and Ohio train to the ground.
Yikes.
And not losing a man, White has successfully wrecked Point of Rocks, providing a second point of severing the B&O to go with Martinsburg, West Virginia, making sure that the B&O is not going to be used during the rest of the summer campaign to reinforce any Union army that happens to be marching north to try to intercept the Confederates as they head for Pennsylvania. So with that, let's talk about Gettysburg, because the rebels are in Chambersburg. They've wrecked the railroads in that area. The Scotland Bridge is in flames. And there's the railroad from Gettysburg, you see there. Now, Gettysburg, so somewhat surprisingly, is one of the last towns in South Central Pennsylvania to get a railroad. I live in York. Our railroad arrived in 1838, in December of 1838. First train arrived here. Harrisburg already had rail service, of course. A number of the towns in South Central Pennsylvania get trains in the 1840s and 1850s, but Gettysburg does not get their first railroad until November of 1858, way after other railroads had long since been established. Part of that's because Gettysburg's in the middle of nowhere. It's a small little town. And of course, world famous today because of the Civil War. But at the time in 1858, this is a backwoods, small little town trying to shed its agricultural image and trying to become a little more industrialized when they bring the railroad in. The train station in Gettysburg that most of us are quite familiar with opens in 1859 in May. So this is a new railroad. And Gettysburg, like so many towns in South Central Pennsylvania, has 2 trains a day. There's a morning train that will leave Gettysburg at 8 o'clock in the morning. It will go east through New Oxford to Hanover, Pennsylvania, where it will continue on the tracks of the Hanover Branch Railroad out to Hanover Junction. We'll talk about that place in a minute. The train will turn around at Hanover Junction on the turntable there and will steam back into Hanover through New Oxford and back to Gettysburg, arriving at 1:30 in the afternoon. After they prep the train, the afternoon train leaves at 4:15 and returns at 9 o'clock at night into Gettysburg. So that's the service in 1863 as we think about Gettysburg and the Battle of Gettysburg that's going to happen. Now, the railroad stopped at that train station. So if we go back here, that train station is the terminus of the railroad. It went a few yards just to the west of that as far as the tracks have been laid, but nothing else has been laid. They have cut through 3 ridges west of Gettysburg because the plan is to run the railroad tracks from Gettysburg west to Chambersburg, but that's not been done. Remember, Gettysburg Railroad has just been finished in 1858. The station's put in 1859, and then the Civil War happens in 1861, and all the work on this railroad halts because the government's got more important things to do. It's hard to get rails. It's hard to get wood for ties. It's all being diverted to military attention. So these railroad cuts, and this photograph by William Tipton is not from the Battle of Gettysburg. It's from a few years after the battle, but it shows one of these 3 railroad cuts. It's a great photograph showing how the crew of the Gettysburg Railroad had been feverishly working before the Civil War began to at least lay out the rail bed and get everything ready for the eventual installation of the ties. On Friday, June 26th at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, after 1.3 inches of rain had fallen overnight on Gettysburg, the Confederate Army takes the town. Now, a lot of Civil War buffs, even some hardcore Civil War buffs, aren't aware of the fact the Confederate Army took Gettysburg a week before the big battle. They have Gettysburg on Friday, June 26th. They chase off the 700 men of the 26th Pennsylvania Volunteer Militia, sort of a precursor to Pennsylvania National Guard, and they take Gettysburg. They've got the high
Wow.
ground. They've got Cemetery Hill. They've got
Unbelievable.
Seminary Ridge. They've got Cemetery Hill. They've got it all. But, Gettysburg's a backwoods little town. They don't really care. And the first Confederate officer in Gettysburg is our friend Elijah White. The guy who had sacked Point of Rocks, Maryland, is given the responsibility of driving the Federals out of downtown Gettysburg. And so you see the dude who thinks he looks like Jeb Stuart in this Dale Gallen picture, but that is Elijah White. So June 26th, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Elijah White takes Gettysburg. Now, one of the things his men are going to do after they find some alcohol and get fired up, they're going to literally find 6 railroad cars sitting there filled with supplies for the 26th Pennsylvania Volunteer Militia. They will take the supplies out of the railroad cars, which may or may not include shoes. That's kind of debatable point, but they do find brand new rifles, lots of ammunition, lots of food, meant for the Pennsylvania State Militia. Now, for those of you familiar with Gettysburg, Gettysburg's on a little bit of a plateau, and Rock Creek is down here. It's probably a drop of maybe 30 feet, and it's a very gradual drop down to Rock Creek. So the railroad tracks in downtown Gettysburg drop downhill to the covered railroad bridge over Rock Creek. The Confederates set the first railroad car on fire, roll it down the hill, and they keep lighting each car up. And eventually all 6 railroad cars are sent down to the bridge. They eventually will crash into a mess, and the railroad bridge is set on fire to the amusement of the Confederate soldiers, severing rail connections from Gettysburg to Hanover. So that next morning, June 28th, 1860, June 27th, 1863, the Confederates don't want Gettysburg. It's not the objective of Robert E. Lee to fight a battle at Gettysburg. Was never his objective. His objective was to win a battle somewhere in South Central Pennsylvania, most likely in Dillsburg here in York County, but not at Gettysburg, at least initially, because a careful reading of the Confederate orders is they're all to meet at Dillsburg in northwestern York County. So everybody starts leaving Gettysburg. 2 Confederates stay behind. One is captured as a spy and hung by John Buford. The other man dies of alcohol poisoning. He's a Louisiana Tiger. And so the only 2 Confederates they leave behind are dead guys. Everyone else, the goal is the Susquehanna River. Remember, back in 1862, Stonewall Jackson, give me 36,000 men and I will take the war to the banks of the Susquehanna River. It's 1863. There are 75,000 Confederates on their way to Pennsylvania. So this is Jackson's plan in spades, minus Stonewall Jackson, who of course has died of pneumonia. So everybody's heading towards the river. In the meantime, let's keep wrecking the railroads. Now, the next railroad, perhaps the single most damaged railroad in the entire campaign, is the Northern Central Railway. This ran from Baltimore. They had a train station at Calvert Station, about where the downtown athletic club is today in Baltimore, along Interstate 83. This railroad ran from Baltimore north through York to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, from Harrisburg north through Williamsport, where the Little League World Series is being played now, through Williamsport up through Elmira, New York. So this is from Baltimore to Elmira, New York. This is the #1 supply route for coal, anthracite coal, for the Union Navy. The anthracite coal from 5 counties in north central Pennsylvania burns with it's a very hard coal, burns with very little smoke, versus the bituminous coal that's coming from West Virginia, Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, etc., over the B&O and other routes to supply the Union Navy. So they're going to use this anthracite coal for the blockade ships that are blockading the South through the Anaconda Plan. The blockade runners coming in from England are burning bituminous coal, soft coal. In fact, it's peat moss mixed in with it in a lot of cases, a very thick, black, oily smoke. So one of the Confederates' objectives is to break apart the Northern Central Railway, thinking that this supply of anthracite coal to the Union Navy's blockade ships will be broken down and will be destroyed, at least that connection. And perhaps some of the southern ports will be open for a little bit of time,
Hmm.
and you can get supplies, much needed supplies, ammunition, food, clothing, whatever, into southern ports, particularly places like Wilmington, North Carolina, etc.
Hmm.
This Northern Central Railway features pretty prominently in their plans. The Northern Central connects to the Gettysburg Railroad with a small 9 mile or so branch called the Hanover Branch Railroad. So the Hanover Branch meets the Northern Central at a junction called Hanover Junction. There's a Hanover Junction in Virginia where the Virginia Central meets the main line coming in from Richmond. This is Hanover Junction, Pennsylvania. So the railroad on the left is the Hanover Branch. The railroad on the right is the Northern Central. So it's now Sunday, June 28th, and the Northern Central becomes the new Confederate target. Uh, Obviously, York, Pennsylvania, where all the warehouses are, where most of the repair shops, etc., for the Northern Central are, becomes a very important part of Confederate strategy. At the same time, our friend Albert Gallatin Jenkins, the guy who wrecked Martinsburg and it also wrecked the Franklin Railroad, he is now taking on the railroad between Carlisle and the west shore of Harrisburg. And about that time, Gettysburg finally comes back into the picture when Union cavalry from Michigan ride into Gettysburg. And Robert E. Lee realizes that day on June 28th that the battle's not going to be fought at Dillsburg where he planned. Battle's probably going to have to be fought somewhere near Gettysburg. But that Sunday, June 28th, Albert Gallatin Jenkins, the conqueror of Martinsburg, goes in this very building that's on the picture here on the right. He goes into the window that's on the bottom right corner. That happens to be the tap room, the bar of this railroad office slash hotel. You can see the railroad tracks there are just at the very bottom left of that picture.
Yep.
Albert Gallatin Jenkins goes up to the barkeeper, orders a pitcher of ice water, puts his feet up on the table, and orders all the newspapers from Harrisburg. And he reads in the Harrisburg newspapers complete plans of the defense of the Susquehanna River. Now, at the time of the Civil War, there are two bridges in Harrisburg, and the only other bridge between Harrisburg and Maryland is the world's longest covered railroad bridge. That's the Wrightsville, Pennsylvania, between Wrightsville and Columbia. And again, it's the longest covered railroad bridge, I think, ever built on Earth. And it certainly at the time was the longest covered bridge of any sort on Earth. But Jenkins gets complete plans of the defenses. He knows where the Yankee troops are, the names of their commanders, etc. On the front page of the Harrisburg newspaper, for example, he learns the 26th New York State National Guard has arrived. They should be in New York. They're not. They're in Harrisburg. And they've arrived via rail. They've come from Brooklyn and New York City via Newark, New Jersey, and Philadelphia on the railroads, and the Pennsylvania Railroad has delivered these guys to Harrisburg. There's 10,000 of them. Not supposed to be anybody guarding Harrisburg, and to Jenkins' consternation, there's 10,000 New Yorkers, plus about 3,000 Pennsylvania volunteers. And so he even knows the names of the commanders. Lloyd Aspinwall, for example, commanding this. Jenkins knows everything there is to know about how to attack Harrisburg. And that, the knowledge that the Confederate mounted infantry has arrived on the heights opposite Harrisburg leads the railroads to start abandoning ship. Every single locomotive, every single piece of rolling stock that can be moved out of South Central Pennsylvania safely starts heading for the hills. They're either taken across the bridge at Wrightsville and head towards Downingtown and Westchester and Philadelphia to be saved, or they're sent north through Harrisburg and on up to Sunbury and Northumberland, north of Harrisburg for safekeeping. Thousands and thousands of refugees pour into Harrisburg, and the railroad starts getting the heck out of there. That same day, here in York, Pennsylvania, Jeb Worley, 6,600 men occupy York. York will become the largest town in the entire northern United States, in free soil northern United States, to follow the Confederate Army during the entire Civil War. We're it. We have the distinction of being the biggest town that surrendered to the Confederate Army,
Hmm.
at least in the North. So the rebels are going to occupy downtown York. They will go to work on the 28th and 29th. The Northern Central Railway has 34 bridges in York County, and Jeb Worley's cavalry, particularly Elijah White on the 35th Battalion Virginia Cavalry. Remember the first guy at Point of Rocks, the first guy in Gettysburg. He destroys at least 31 of the 34 bridges between himself and the 17th
Wow.
Virginia Cavalry under Colonel William Henderson French. They're also going to destroy $12,000 worth of rolling stock. The Northern Central Railway loses a full 10% of all of its rolling stock. 10%. Massive financial hit because they can't get them out of York fast enough. They also have an ironclad on loan from the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad that had built the thing at its shops at Mount Clair Station in Baltimore. This ironclad had been sent up to Pennsylvania to try to protect the railroad at York, and instead it never fires a shot. It's got an artillery piece on it. It's got 6-inch or so iron plating around it, and it burns, the inside of it burns pretty well. Never fires a shot. 31 railroad bridges alone on the Northern Central. That night, Sunday, June 28th, the rebels go for Wrightsville. This is a picture of the Wrightsville Bridge as it existed in the late 1800s. This is not the Civil War bridge, but it's the replacement bridge. They head towards the Civil War bridge. The Yankees want to knock a hole in the bridge, in the deck, so the Confederates cannot walk across the 1.25 mile wide bridge, but they got a cannon. They don't have any ammunition, not a single cannonball. So they can't do that. Then they decide to blow up one span of the bridge, but it's a railroad bridge, folks. Gunpowder is not going to do much to a railroad bridge. It's going to blow holes in the sidewalls, blow the roof apart, but the deck is certainly fine. And so their last resort is to cover that section with coal oil and set it on fire. Problem is the wind shifts, and instead of burning one little section and dropping it into the Susquehanna River, instead the entire bridge burns over a 6-hour period. This is my neighbor Bradley Schmel's wonderful painting, showing again this is the only painting Schmel ever did of the bridge. Phenomenal painting. He's wrong on a couple things, like the railroad did not say PRR, it said Penna RR at the time of the Civil War, but he's got most of the other details correct as this bridge burns. It's 51-year-old oak and pine, and it burns really well and incredibly hot. They can't put the bridge fire out, and as mentioned, the wind shifts, entire bridge is destroyed. The next day, on Monday, June 29th, Jeb Stuart rolls into Westminster, Maryland. Now, they've got a railroad called the Western Maryland Railroad. It ran from Westminster down to Relay House, Maryland, where it joined the Northern Central Railway. So a very short, railroad. Again, a regional farming and light industry and milling railroad, predominantly designed to get flour into the Baltimore market, meat into Baltimore, grain, barley, wheat, whatever. Jeb Stuart, because Westminster is a pro-Confederate town, decides he's not going to break apart the railroad. Remember, he's been burned in 1862 by not destroying the Scotland Railroad Bridge. He's going to get burned in 1863 big time by not destroying the Western Maryland. And so he leaves it 100% intact. Nothing, not one single tie. Now you can't even take down the telegraph line because this railroad doesn't have a telegraph system. They don't bring a telegraph on until 1864. So this is an isolated backwoods community, and Jeb Stuart leaves the railroad intact. Mistake. We're going to talk about that later. So on Tuesday, June 30th, Stuart's going to head to York County, trying to get to Dillsburg. has no idea that everything shifted and Robert E. Lee now wants the army to concentrate between Heidlersburg, Cashtown, and Gettysburg. He still thinks he's supposed to be going to Dillsburg, so that's where he's going. He's not gallivanting. He's not joy hunting. He's not looking to get his name in northern newspapers, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff you read in tired, trite books that are wrong. If you read Stuart and the Confederate accounts, he's simply trying to find Jubal Early. He's trying to get to Dillsburg and York. He's never going to get there because he's 2 days behind schedule because of fighting at Westminster that he did when he decided not to break apart the railroad. He just knocked out the 1st Delaware Cavalry. But Tuesday, June 30th. Now, I'm often asked, as June 30th turns into July and the Battle of Gettysburg starts raging, why George Pickett isn't at Gettysburg on July 1st? The answer's real simple. He's wrecking railroads like everyone's supposed to be doing. He's at Chambersburg. And you see on this old period map, Chambersburg there in the just off the shoulder of George Pickett. His men will destroy every single railroad facility. They will destroy all the rolling stock they can find in Chambersburg, and he will break apart the railroad all the way up to Scotland. Now, the Yankees had tried rebuilding that bridge that Albert Gallatin Jenkins had destroyed last week, and now George Pickett's men wreck it again another time. So Pickett's men are not at Gettysburg because they're wrecking the railroad under orders from their commanding officer, James Longstreet. And I like this quote from a merchant in downtown Chambersburg because it gives you some idea. 2 days later, when Pickett's men are asked to charge at Gettysburg, Pickett's charge, they're tired. They're whipped long before they ever start that mile-wide charge across in the July heat at Gettysburg. Read this account. Along with the cross ties of the road, William Heiser wrote, Pickett's men, pile on all the fence they could find to heat and twist the rails. Pickett's neckties. Another force of about 500 men, James Kemper's brigade, have been sent to destroy the railroad depot and buildings, starting with a large turntable. It is so soundly built of iron. Oh, where's where the iron really comes in. Their fires had little effect. The engine house was pulled down after what? An immense amount of work. You can mark the line of railroad by the smoke of the burning ties. George Pickett's entire division, Armistead, Kemper, Garnett, all 3 of his brigades are going to fight at Pickett's charge, are wrecking railroads for 2 days before Pickett's charge. They're whipped, an immense amount of work. Tuesday, July 1st, as mentioned, the battle's raging at Gettysburg. Everybody and their brothers there. Here's Jeb Stuart heading to Dillsburg, like he still thinks he's supposed to be doing. That railroad cut west of Gettysburg that had been built originally for the tracks that were supposed to lead to Chambersburg now becomes a trap for Confederate troops from North Carolina and Mississippi that are cut off by the Union Army Brigade, men from 6th Wisconsin specifically, and troops from New York as well that helped them. They are going 14th Brooklyn. They are going to capture a couple hundred Confederates in this railroad cut. So the Battle of Gettysburg is raging. As that's going on, we want to turn our attention briefly to Westminster. July 1st of the battle, Stuart had been in Westminster on June 29th, did not wreck the railroad. So if I go back here, Westminster, as you see on the slide, connects the Western Maryland Railroad, connects a relay house just north of the I in Baltimore there on my slide. So that's intact railroad. So all the Union Army has to do if they want to resupply George Gordon Meade and the Army of the Potomac is to send railroad cars up from Baltimore and Washington up to Relay House, put them west on the Western Maryland, a railroad again that normally had 2 trains a day, and ship the supplies into downtown Westminster. This is what the railroad depot would have looked like at Westminster about the time of the Civil War. This again is a slightly post-war image, but it gives you a pretty good idea of what the town and its warehouses look like. The trains arrive here, 50 trains a day on a railroad designed to do 2 trains a day. 50 trains a day are sent starting late on July 1st. They'll start arriving on July 2nd in Westminster, continue on there. All the supplies are unloaded, put on supply wagons, and pulled by teams of horses or mules 25 miles north to Gettysburg. And then the wagons are brought back down to Westminster, loaded with Confederate prisoners of war or with wounded soldiers that are trying to be evacuated. I mentioned 4,000 Union prisoners at Winchester were taken by rail down to Richmond. 7,000 Confederate prisoners taken at Gettysburg, particularly on July 1st and 2nd, and later at Pickett's Charge. These men are taken on the Western Maryland to downtown Baltimore, where they're incarcerated initially at Fort McHenry. They too are then going to be put on trains, particularly the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore, and sent north to Fort Delaware, where the majority of the prisoners taken at Gettysburg will spend the rest of the war. 50 trains a day, starting on July 2nd. Now, Herman Hopp, one of his trains, Herman Hopp has arrived from Alexandria, bringing 400 men from the Union U.S. Military Railroad. At least they're on their way to try to help rebuild the railroad infrastructure. But on the highest ranking officer killed at Gettysburg is John Fulton Reynolds from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He's shot down on July 1st. His body's taken to the George house. He's put in a coffin for a teenage kid. They have to knock out the one of the foot. And so this tall Union general's boots stick out of the short coffin designed for a teenage kid. They're going to pack him as best they can, put him on a wagon, take him down to Union Bridge, Maryland, just outside of Westminster, where a carpenter for the Western Maryland Railroad will build a suitable coffin the right size for General Reynolds. They'll pack it full of ice at Union Bridge from the train, from the hotel where the train station has, or where the railroad has a ticket office. And they're going to send General Reynolds' body back to Baltimore. There he's embalmed. He's put in a lead-lined coffin, sent on the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore Railroad to Philadelphia, put on a train for the Pennsylvania Railroad, and then sent to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where he is buried. So the highest ranking officer that killed at Gettysburg has this very circuitous route from Gettysburg down to Maryland and back up into Pennsylvania before he's finally buried. Herman Hopp is my hero. I'd be very honest about that. As a Yankee, as a Northerner, his job in the Gettysburg campaign rivals everybody. He's incredibly good. He will bring these, he comes to Gettysburg town on July 5th, surveys all the damage. Within days, they've got the Gettysburg Railroad back up and running. His crews arrive. They will repair all 31 bridges on the Northern Central. They'll repair all the bridges on the Franklin Railroad. They'll repair all the bridges on the Gettysburg Railroad, all the bridges on the Cumberland Valley Railroad. He fixes the entire infrastructure of South Central Pennsylvania in a little less than 3 weeks. It's incredible. All the damage that Robert E. Lee wanted to inflict on the Union goes to naught. It's all for nothing. Every single bridge is repaired. And so this is the railroad line. That's Gettysburg to Hanover, Hanover Branch to Hanover, and then coming here to York. 11,000 wounded soldiers. Now that this railroad is back up and running, they're starting to evacuate wounded, not by wagon train down to Westminster. Now you can load them up at the train station in downtown Gettysburg, and you can send them to Hanover Junction.
Wow.
Again, 11,000 men wounded at Gettysburg are taken by rail to Hanover Junction here in York County. And I like this quote from a teenage boy here in York County. Comfortable cars were not available, and anything on wheels that could run were put into service. Ordinary boxcars, stock cars, gondolas, sand and lime cars, made as comfortable as could be done by layers of hay and straw. All manner of men bearing all manner of wounds could be stretched out on the floors of the rail cars, some weeping, some praying, some cursing, some holding the stumps of their legs in their hands, some with but one hand left to use. Great description of the railroad trains leaving Gettysburg filled with wounded. Again, this is Hanover Junction. The U.S. Army sends Dr. John Cuyler, who's from Baltimore. He and a group of women volunteers from the U.S. Christian Commission arrive at Hanover Junction. They have all this food, brandy, supplies, lemonade, etc., that are going to feed the 11,000 wounded men that are pouring there. There's a giant tent city set up. They're doing triage, trying to figure out where they're going to send these different wounded guys. They're going to send a lot of them to Philadelphia, to the Satterley Hospital, 4,500 bed. It's the largest military hospital in Pennsylvania at the time. Maurer Hospital, the overflow, has 3,600 beds. The cotton factory in Harrisburg has a couple thousand beds. And here in York, there's the closest hospital to the Gettysburg battlefield is the U.S. Army Hospital, Penn Park in downtown York. That has 1,600 beds. And so that will become the #1 staging point for the most seriously wounded, the guys who need operations as fast as possible. So at 9 o'clock on July 17th, U.S. military railroad trains 80 and 47 arrived in Hanover Junction, came here to York. They brought 200 wounded men. 6 other trains leave that day for New York City. 4 or 5 other trains leave for Baltimore and Washington, D.C. So all the way for 9 days from July 17th through the 26th, you have at least 1 train a day, sometimes as many as 5 trains a day, transporting people. 1,200 of those 11,000 wounded are going to be treated here in York. And this is the U.S. Army Hospital. What it will look like, the train tracks are off to my left, off the picture. They're not, they weren't, for some reason, the guy who sketched this back in 1864 never sketched the railroad tracks, but they could just simply bring the trains in, park them right there, and let out the prisoners, let out the wounded guys. This is what the hospital would have looked like on the inside. Of the 1,100 men evacuated, 1,200 men evacuated from Gettysburg to York, mostly the really badly wounded men, only 32 of them die. The hospital has an incredibly great safety record. 14,000 wounded treated at the York Hospital throughout the entire war. 192 of them died. So it's an incredibly safe hospital. 200 Confederates were brought by rail from Gettysburg, mostly wounded, again, mostly critical. The Union Army refuses to treat them. They let civilian doctors put them up in the Oddfellows Hall. The U.S. government will rent it for $75 a month, and 200 Confederate prisoners of war who are grievously wounded are being treated there. So that concludes my talk on the Gettysburg campaign. I'm just going to look at one railroad, Northern Central, because we have the complete records of the Northern Central here in York. The railroad, as a result of the Gettysburg campaign, $234,000 in necessary repairs, above and beyond what the U.S. military is fixing. This is the cost of the railroad itself. $108,793 in lost revenues. That's the average monthly tally for freight and passenger service. Again, 10%. I mean, 1 out of every 10 boxcars, sand cars, line cars, they're all destroyed. Rail service between York and Lancaster is disrupted until 1867. It's going to be 4 years before a train ever crosses the Susquehanna River between Lancaster County and York County, Pennsylvania. The problem with that is a lot of supplies are pouring into Columbia, assuming they can cross the river, which they can't, and the ferry boat and the flat cars can't keep up with the demand. And so all these supplies, particularly medical supplies, stack up in Columbia when they're needed at Gettysburg. We have no clue how many wounded men die at Gettysburg because so much of the relief supplies just simply can't get there for a week until after the battle. So I want to thank Austin for his invitation to speak. I want to thank Tom for your leadership of the group and for you graciously making the arrangements. Thanks for the right link. Hopefully it all worked, and I appreciate everyone's time tonight. If you're interested, here are my Civil War Railroad books. Bottom left, the orange book is the Northern Central Railway in the Civil War. The next one is the Western Maryland Railroad. The black one is the Lincoln Funeral Train. The next one in the beige is the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore Railroad. And on the right is, I think, the best of the bunch, and that is the Cumberland Valley Railroad in the Civil War. So if you're interested, all those books are available either from me or Amazon or your friendly neighborhood Walmart, walmart.com, target.com. I mean, a lot of these books are available from the large big box stores via their websites. So I want to turn it back to you, Tom, in case anybody has any questions. And again, I appreciate everyone's time and patience tonight.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome, man. This is great. I tell you, you're like a walking encyclopedia. Jesus, the amount of knowledge. I mean, it's like you're channeling. I was wondering, is this guy breathing? It was
It's a
great. I
lot of
mean,
material to go over in an hour.
yeah, I had, one question. That kid mentioned lime cars and sand cars.
Mhm.
Were they a special kind of car, or was that just a gondola or something that was just
They were basic gondolas. If you read the Northern Central Railway's official reports from during the Civil War are still available. You can read them on Google Books. They just call them gondolas. The teenage boy called them sand cars and lime cars because that's what they normally carried. Lime was a huge product from York County, from quarries in Wrightsville. It was burned in lime kilns at Wrightsville and was sent by rail down to Havre de Grace, Maryland, and put on ships and actually taken all across the United States for that. Uh,
got it.
so sand cars similarly would carry sand for railroad use or again for the U.S. military. They would use sand for sandbags, things like that that could be used for military defenses of Washington, D.C.
So it wasn't like any car was like specifically designated or colored. It was
That
just
happened to
that's what
be,
it carried,
yeah, that's what they typically carry.
and everybody knew that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've asked people before if they had any specificity that, this was designed differently for sand versus lime. And everybody that's kind of knows anything about the railroads here in York County tell me no, it just was the, common usage.
Yeah, I see John and Vince nodding, so they're hip to that. That's cool. Anybody have any questions or for Scott?
So the lime you're talking about, in other words, that was used in iron making.
I can't hear them.
When it burned,
The
the
lime.
burning it was the purpose of burning it for manufacturing.
He was asking about the use of the lime.
Oh, no, the lime was used in construction. They burned the limestone to create calcium oxide. Sorry, I'm a chemist. So they created calcium oxide. That was known as quicklime. It was used in mortar. So if you're going to build entrenchments, brick buildings, if you're going to put up anything that required mortar, so the lime was used for mortar.
You had
And rice lime, by the way, was considered to be the finest lime in the world at that point. And ironically, most of the southern capital buildings in South America, in places like Quito, Asuncion, Santiago, places like that, were actually constructed after the Civil War using lime from Wrightsville.
so you had one photo early on of Alexandria, and it had a couple of I look like 2 8 O's or something. Where did you get that photo? Because I don't, has anybody ever seen, I've never seen that photo.
I'm going to quickly go back through my slides, look for
It's
which
not
one you're talking-
Alexandria.
It wasn't
It's Martinsburg.
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 Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But I haven't
Yeah,
seen that.
That's from the B&O Museum in Baltimore.
Yeah. U.S. Military Railroad did not actually use any 8-coupled
Where was
that
that?
I found it,
Where
any
did you
records.
find that photo, though? I was curious. Was that LOC?
No, that photo came from the Baltimore and Ohio Museum.
Right.
Yeah, in the old Mount Clair station
Was
in downtown Baltimore.
was it a 460?
Yeah, that was a 10-wheeler.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a post-war picture. It's not a Civil War picture.
Right. I really enjoyed it. A lot of our display layout is the orange in Alexandria. The one that I put together that we take like to conventions. And I pick such wonderful places as Sanger Station to model,
Uh-huh.
which shows the blockhouse and the amount of troops it took to secure the railroad against the privations. Because I'm talking logistics, I'm not talking tactics.
Sure.
usually in those presentations. Always enjoy your talk, Scott.
Yeah.
I don't think I have actually talked to you probably since the HMGS convention where John Hill got his award.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, that Valley Forge.
That's been a long time.
Yeah, it was the Valley
Uh,
Forge Convention Center.
Valley Forge, yeah, right, right. Because I just thought of that today because I'm back in King of Prussia this fall for
Oh, there you go.
the Northeast Regional Convention.
Yep.
But thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
I learned a lot today. That is
I
really,
appreciate that.
really a lot
Yeah,
of fun.
mean,
I
yeah,
enjoyed it.
I'm like over the winter. I'll write the book, so hopefully it'll be out by next summer. And I'll send it. I'll post something on the Yahoo group, IO group to talk about when it's available.
Cool.
Thank you. Okay.
What was I was gonna say? Oh, you had that one photo of the, looks like the HO model of the station in Gettysburg.
Yeah, that's actually in Gettysburg.
Right.
There's a layout of the town, of course, that it's
Well, we were
Union.
there on one of our annual meets, and
Okay.
I forget, do you remember the professor's name, the doctor? He was like the curator at that museum, and he did us a tour, and I mean, he was like masterful. He built this N scale full model of Gettysburg. I don't,
I can't think of his name off the top of my
yeah,
head.
he was, yeah, I saw that, and it was a brilliant piece of scratch building. And he
Yeah.
said that was the first that he knew of, what'd you call it? Kind of like a hump yard where the passenger car, because it
Gravity.
do a switchback, and they had to just let it ride down the rails to the station. And then it would go up and do the turnaround on the turntable. Like, whoa, that was a nice, cool feature in his model.
Yeah, there's somebody on eBay that 3D prints the Gettysburg station that you can get.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can get most of the Gettysburg buildings.
Yeah, my friend John Mayer has a company called
Yeah.
Buildings in Turmoil. For
Absolutely. I was
wargaming.
getting ready to plug John.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
I have
Oh.
all of his Gettysburg buildings.
I got it
I'm
right
working
I
on.
got it right behind me and all my wargaming stuff here.
Yeah,
Yes.
board gamers.
One of these days, yes. Right now, matter of fact, I was just reviewing your Gettysburg books for a
Oh.
regimental scenario
Yeah.
I'm working out right now.
Oh, cool.
Are you still game, Joe? You
Oh,
still
yes.
game? Oh, yeah. Cool.
Hey! I'm sorry. I will be. I will say bad words, but I'm a fire and fury guy.
Oh, okay. God, I did that once. Yeah.
Well, yeah. If you
I did
check
it
any
once
of the
too.
fire
That's
and
why I'm a
fury
Johnny
books, you'll
Reb guy.
find me up at the front as one of the testers, and I did a little bit of writing. I do have a Johnny Reb set too,
I
but
know.
Yes, I had that too.
Yeah, I admire Rich Hazenauer. I tease him all the time about Johnny Reb. Now that John Hill's not here to defend himself.
yes, yeah. That matter of fact, King of Prussia, I had a wonderful chat with John. We're out by the pool for like an hour and a half.
Yeah.